Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Lourdes Ramirez Wright, and as you know, I put out videos on stress related issues based on trauma which you might have suffered as a child, or maybe you served in the military and you came back with PTSD. Typically, I refer to women, females in my videos because I am a woman, and getting to understand the female mind and anatomy and biology and everything else that comes with it is a handful enough. And so instead of jumping to the male area, I sort of leave that to the guys, to males. So I typically address women, but men are more than welcome to listen to these videos and hopefully they can get something out of it. I always like to start by saying that I am not a medical doctor. I do not give professional advice. I might give friendly suggestions based on my personal experience and my readings. I write books about stress, chronic stress, PTSD, CPTSD. That's what I write about because that is a form of therapy for me. But in addition to that, I feel that now that I am so familiar with the reasons why people develop stress disorders, I cannot just sit on that information, but I have it's almost a moral duty that I have to share it with you just in case you're looking for that extra help online. When I was going through my worst times with chronic stress, we did not have social media, and in spite of the fact that I don't think that people should rely on social media, you can actually use social media to your advantage or your benefit, because if you go through social media to the correct platforms, you're going to find out that your situation is not so individual or specific. I mean, it's pretty much happening all over the place. If you know where to go, you actually feel like you're being supported. Okay, because you're not going to get support from your narcissist abusers in your life. You're definitely not going to get any support from them. So you really have to go elsewhere. And for those of you who are not ready maybe to see a therapist or pay for a therapist because it can be very expensive, and you're sort of surfing through the internet for answers, maybe trying to read anecdotes and stories, that's what I do in my platforms. That's precisely what I do. But I am not by any means of the imagination in the field of psychology or psychiatry. So please do not take anything that I say as professional advice. Instead, take it from someone who's been there, done that, and I have the experience and I've done the research enough to write books about it, but this is not to be taken as professional advice. So if you pretty much go through any source of information and you search for causes of stress in Americans or the main causes of stress, you're going to find pretty much the same list. And sometimes one thing might be transposed, it might be turned one way or another depending on the source. Sometimes you will find that finances or money issues are the number one reason for chronic stress in America. And then other sources will tell you that it is work, employment, jobs. That happens to be number one. So pretty much wherever you go, It's going to be there's going to be a very similar list to the one you've seen before. Sometimes one or two of those items will be moved around, but pretty much is the same list. So I hope we all agree on that. So they tend to include work, finances, and interpersonal or personal relationships, and also parenting comes to the table a lot, and so do major life changes. And I think that it's fair to say that we all go through major life changes, right? I think that's pretty universal. So those are the basic things that are causing chronic stress in America. After the pandemic of 2020, it just seems like things got a little bit worse. You hear that employers are having a very difficult time maintaining or keeping good staff, hardworking people who show up with the energy and the positive attitude to do the work. And a lot of businesses did close. They did not survive the pandemic. And it seems like the competence level, the dedication, the work ethic are just not there as much as once they were. Maybe when you and I were growing up, we could watch our parents, every single day get up early, go to work, come home, be with the family, and get up the next day to do it all over again. Today, things are a little bit different. And I think we have to accept that. We don't have to be a part of that, but we just have to acknowledge that that's the reality right now. So to go through the list, of stressors, I should say, let's take financial, for instance. Finances are obviously, I think, a concern for everybody, even the wealthy. And we are in that election year in November. We're going to be voting, and all I can say is go out there and vote and make your voice be heard, and that's how you do it. And it can mean a difference in your pocket depending on the candidate that you choose as your next president. It will make a difference in your financial situation. Just consider that. Also, when it comes to finances, somebody told me one time, if you ever want to be able to pay your bills, you work hard, you show up early, and you leave late. You put in your hours, and you do it all over again. And you do this, and you pay your bills, and you're going to have a comfortable life, pretty much. But the same person also said, if you ever want to become a millionaire, you have to work for yourself. Meaning, working for someone else is only going to take you so far. But when you have your own business, you pretty much have full control. If you are very good at what you do, and you get the right people to work for you, and you put in the time, chances are that you are going to retire with a very comfortable investment or bank account, or both. So you might want to consider that. For those of you who are bringing up kids nowadays, college, undergraduate, getting an associate degree, or getting a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or a doctor's degree, those things are very important, extremely important, but they're not everything, and they do not guarantee success or wealth. They do not. A lot of the very wealthy people that did not go to college or are college dropouts. But they had the right people, they put in the time, and they loved what they were doing. They were working for themselves. So when it comes to financial, Another thing that someone very wise with money told me was that you cannot spend more than what you have, right? Nowadays, it's very easy to pay with credit cards, to pay with checks, when in reality, if you don't have enough cash to pay for something, that in and of itself should tell you something, right? If you have to use a piece of plastic with a magnetic tape on the other side and a code, right? You might not be able to afford what you are trying to purchase. Let's say something big, something that you don't need, but something that you want. So saving is going to save you from further financial burdens. If you cannot afford it, just hang on, keep saving. Maybe one day you might have enough to purchase that item or object, but for now, maybe this is just not the right time, right? So I am not here to give financial advice, but those are little things that throughout my years I learned, sometimes the hard way, and sometimes just by speaking with people who really know how to save money and how to turn a little bit of money into a large amount of money. Those are things that I learned throughout the years, but I am not here to give financial advice in any way, shape, or form. That's just, a tidbit of information. You really cannot spend more than what you earn, right? And if you find yourself using a lot of paper, plastic, when you purchase stuff, maybe that's a sign that you should not be purchasing it to begin with. Let's move on to the next one, work. Work seems to be a common issue with people who suffer with chronic stress, and work can be a blessing because that's how you pay bills. At the same time, we live in a very toxic world. I keep using that word because it is so telling. I mean, it really encompasses what's going on, what we're seeing in society. It is a toxic society. And the workplace is not an exception. And there is such a thing as a toxic structure, or a toxic company, a toxic coworker, a toxic supervisor. There is such a thing. And you just have to learn to recognize and see the red flags and not ignore them. It can actually make you ill. And a lot of people who have had plenty of experience and plenty of wealth have said that money is not always everything, that they're willing to take a cut in salary in order for them to be working at a place that they truly enjoy. Whereas working at a place where you're completely miserable but are making very good money will eventually make you ill, will shorten your lifespan, will carry on into your personal relationship, whether it be with your spouse, girlfriend, the person closest to you. So that's something that you want to consider when it comes to work. Again, working for yourself is always an alternative. Not for everybody. It might be much easier to work for someone else, but there's something to be said about having your own business because you pretty much control everything entailed with that industry. The money coming in, how much money you're spending, you do your own inventory, you hire your own people, you set salaries, you put in the amount of hours that you need to make it succeed. You pretty much have control. There are downsides of having your own companies, and that is, for instance, you are your own services. If you, for instance, have a restaurant, you're the owner, then instead of calling somebody to fix the electric problem that you're having, you might have to fix it yourself. Or a plumbing problem, you might have to fix that problem yourself. Or if you work at an office and you own your own, say, legal services, then you might have to fix your own fax machine or your own phone lines instead of calling somebody else. It is a way to save money. You don't have to wait for personnel, and you're right there. So it is much more pragmatic sometimes for you to fix your own equipment than it is to call somebody else. So those are things you have to take into consideration when you think about starting your own business. But just keep in mind that for some people, it is their freedom and their way out of work, stress, and financial restraints. So let's tackle personal relationships. When it comes to personal relationships, I have written book after book after book after book. It's all over Amazon. My books are in Amazon. I have right now 10 books. Yes, 10 books that I have written. I wrote 9 within less than 2 years, and I wrote one about 4 or 5 years ago. So altogether, I have 10 books out there, and for the most part, they are regarding personal relationships, because I think that one of the biggest stressors that people are having has to do with interpersonal relationships. And I've said it before and I will say it again, and you can read it everywhere. You are the average of the 5 people closest to you. Those people, those 5 people who on day, from the time you start your day until you turn in at night and you get up the next day to go to work, those people, those 5 people who are closest to you, you are their average. So birds of a feather do flock together. It's one of the truest statements that you can find. So you have to pick your circles very, very efficiently and very carefully. Unfortunately, this includes relatives, family members, close acquaintances. It's not just, the people you see on regular basis, but these could be people that are so included in your daily life. Those are the people you also have to examine. Are these people bringing chaos into my life? Are they making my life harder, tougher? Or are they bringing light and happiness, sunshine into my day? You have to assess the situation from an objective point of view. You have to almost separate yourself emotionally from what you're seeing so that you can make a fair assessment as to whether or not those are the right people for you. Because if you don't do that, what happens is you are creating an overload of stress in your system, and you might not even know why. And it's because you're not even considering that those closest to you are the very people causing damage. I always like to insert in there a little story here and there to make my point. If you have read my books, you know about my background and my childhood, and actually that's how I developed my complex PTSD that took me so many years to work on and to actually make depression disappear and all of that. The best book that encompasses my childhood and the trauma that I suffered, I titled it Cone of Silence. So you can go on Amazon and you can read it. I have it on Kindle, but I also I'm pretty sure that I got it paperback. But if you get to read it, you're going to get just an idea as to what I'm talking about here. But here's a here's an anecdote regarding, again, family. I was invited with my husband to go to a place called Outback, and they sell steaks and that kind of thing. And I want to say that it was our anniversary, or maybe it was my husband's birthday, or maybe it was my birthday, or there was some occasion for us to celebrate, and we were invited by my sister to go to Outback. And of course I said yes, and I was ready to have a nice dinner and a good time. And she and her husband had just come from Puerto Rico. That's the place where I was born. And 2 houses down, we had a neighbor by the name of Doris. Doris had a child. And the child, I'm trying to go back and think how old he was, and I cannot even remember. But if I had to guess, he might have been maybe 5 or 6 years old when I left Puerto Rico to come live in the United States. And mind you, or I assure you, that when this conversation at Outback was taking place, I had been living in the United States for over 40 years. Over 40 years. I had been living in the United States when this conversation, this dinner was taking place at Outback. And my sister and her husband had just come from Puerto Rico. They were visiting. I am not sure as to whether or not my mom and dad visited Puerto Rico or not. I know for sure my sister and her husband went. But when I was invited that night, just a couple of years ago, this would have been, or a few years ago, the year 2021 or somewhere around there, when I was invited, my parents also came. So in one large table, we had my mom, my dad, my brother-in-law, my sister, my husband, and I. 6 people at the table. And I was, I had just ordered, or I was waiting for my order to come, or I was waiting for the waitress to take the order. I cannot remember. But I was just, just sitting there, minding my own business, having a conversation with my husband and listening to what they were talking about. And they were all very, very preoccupied with their phones. My sister was very preoccupied, and they were all just really, really concentrating on whatever she was looking up. And they just happened to have mentioned that they had just come from Puerto Rico. And all of a sudden I was asked, Doris, do you remember Doris? And I said, yes, of course I remember her. Yeah, she was our neighbor. She lived 2 houses down. And they said, we saw her when we went to visit Puerto Rico, and she said that you were a bully. And I remember as if it were yesterday how animated they were when they brought me those news to me. Pretty much it was a concerted statement of what the woman had said about me. The only person who did not take participation in that was my father. But the other 3, my brother-in-law, my sister, my mom, they said that this woman had said that about me. And I even remember my mother using her finger to make the motion that that you are, and she made mention of the word. And I remember it struck me as such a tasteless conversation when we were having dinner, and it was a nice occasion. We were all together there. I had just been invited for dinner. And I don't know in which world or planet such an adjective would be a plus, a positive, or a flattering term of endearment. I don't think anybody can think of that word as being something positive or something that you should be repeating. But I was pretty shocked, and I told my husband, because he could not understand it. This was said in Spanish, and my husband he's not that fluent in Spanish, so he really didn't know what was being said. And I said to them, did somebody defend me? Did somebody defend me? And they all said no. All three of them said no. And they continued to work on their phone as if nothing. Just kind of laughed it off, no big deal, nothing important. It was sufficient to sour my evening with them. Not sour my evening at home with my husband, because it's not going to be affected. But it soured the outing and the purpose of getting together with those family members. If you're going to be amongst family members who target you, or who are hateful towards you, or who wish you ill, then you need, in my personal opinion, very fast to detach from those family members who enjoy hurting you, or enjoy seeing you upset, or enjoy taking cheap jabs at you at a public outing. This is unacceptable behavior, and we don't have to take that from anybody, including from our very own relatives. I thought, what kind of a mother would not defend her daughter's name, especially when she was not there to defend her name? If my mother, indeed go to Puerto Rico and she was present when this neighbor made mention of something like that, I would have hoped that my mother would have defended her daughter's name, because I wasn't there to defend myself. But if she was not, and it was just my sister and her husband, they could have done that, because they're blood, right? They're relatives. And you would think, wait a minute, she's not here to defend herself. I don't know what you're talking about, Doris, but you haven't seen my sister in over 40 years. People change. She was a kid herself. When your child was very young, she herself was very young. I don't know what happened, but it's been over 40 years and she's not here. Something to that effect. And the reason why this particular anecdote came to mind is because I keep seeing online the same meme, and it basically says, I don't want anybody in my life who could not defend me when I am not there. I keep seeing that meme online, and I said, I have to, in one of my videos, I have to speak about that, because that is the truth. I mean, a person who truly likes you and loves you and does not mean you harm, and truly respects you and respects your boundaries, and just enjoys having you in her or his life, will defend you when you're not there. Because it's really not fair. You cannot gauge somebody's behavior on 40 plus years ago, can you? Even if I, as a child, had been a bully, because I myself was bullied, that was over 40 years ago. The neighbor, had not seen me for over 40 years. So why bring up something like that? And why didn't anybody defend me? So these are the things that, when it comes to personal relationships causing stress, you really have to look at everyone around you the same way. Do not make exceptions, because when you start applying the subjective test, oh, well, I'm going to make an exception because this is my cousin, or this is my brother, or this is my mom, or this is my grandmother, you're making a tremendous poor justice to your peace of mind and yourself. And that's one important message that I want to leave you before finishing this video. I want to remind you that if you enjoy science fiction, you will want to check out books written by James Wright. I want to say this is the first one that James Wright, well, this is one of his works is inside of this one amongst with other authors, okay? And I want to say that this is the second one written by James Wright. And I got another one right here. And just like these three books that I've shown you, author James Wright has other books in Amazon. If you like martial arts, jiu-jitsu, and violence, reading about violence, science fiction, you're going to love James Wright's books because he is very good at description. His literature, his writing is extremely intelligible, very easy to read and understand. It flows beautifully. Even if you don't like science fiction, you will enjoy these books. So if you're trying to get your mind out of everything that's going on in the world and all the chaos, and you want to pick up some science fiction books, don't forget James Wright. He has more books on Amazon. And don't forget my 10 books. Find me under Lourdes Ramirez Wright or Lourdes Wright. But I made some time ago some changes with the last names because there were way too many Lourdes Wrights online. So I decided to add my maiden name in there. And sometimes it is difficult to see the entire collection in one page of Amazon, but make sure that you look for those books because I do have 10 of them out there and I would love to get feedback from you. Remember, the world is a better place because you are in it.